let's be careful. What do losers do when they're, or people who think losing, what do they do when they're cornered? Why
Mm.
wouldn't they build a bomb if that's their only way out? I mean, that has been a fear of mine for some time, um, as Iran has looked weaker and weaker within the region.
The end of the Assad regime came quickly and for almost everyone unexpectedly. Hundreds of thousands of people died during the civil war, which was as brutal as it was long. Assad is now in Russia and few will miss him. But Syria's new rulers bring with them huge uncertainty. Will they be democratic and pluralist or fundamentalist and violent? Could Syria descend into another civil war? In a minute, we'll hear from the former and for now the last British ambassador to Syria. But first, let's speak to the Times World Affairs editor, Catherine Philp. Catherine, morning to you.
Good morning.
How did this happen? I mean, it happened very quickly, and what has been left with that sudden change?
It did happen very quickly. I think we were all shocked when just a few days ago we heard that Aleppo had fallen into the hands of the rebels, which seemed so extraordinary by itself because it was a place that had been so bitterly fought over and divided over many years. Um, and that was only the beginning. The rebels pushed south and went through Homs, and now into Damascus. Um, I think that, in all these cases, it's when things happen this fast, and in a sense, I think this was less well flag posted for us outside than the fall of Kabul to the Taliban,
Really?
which is sort of the most comparable thing I can think of. I think that even that was far more predictable than this. Um, Now that it's happened, we obviously Assad has left the country. I think that was the only way he was ever going to get out of this conflict was to be extracted or extract himself in that way. And what the remnants of what are left are quite unknowable at the moment. You referred to the group HTS who are nominally in charge. Now, I think if we just look at some of the presentational changes they've made already, they're quite interesting. So we've seen the removal of some of the religious garb that they have worn in the past when they were in alliance with perhaps more extreme rebel factions. The Syrian Prime Minister, who was there under Assad, has agreed to stick around and see the country through to some sort of next stage. I think the obviously one of the other great issues at stake here is that Syria has been such a war of proxies and such a
Yeah.
war of of foreign interference for so long. And indeed, I mean, Freudian slip there, Western interference. In many cases, it was the decision of the West not to intervene that condemns certain factions in Syria to the future that they face. So all of these factors are in play. How will Russia, otherwise distracted in Ukraine, act? Look, it's already taken Assad in, so that tells us something. Um, I think we need to look at Turkey's motivations, which may not be the same as the rest of the West's.
And what might they be interested in? They support a different faction in all of
Yeah,
this.
I mean they were anti-Assad, so they were up for this, but they've also been very against the Syrian Kurds and the level of autonomy that they've achieved in the north of the country. The awkwardness of this, of course, is that those same Kurdish forces are allies of the Americans, and there's still 900 American troops there working with them. Turkey would really like to see, see the back of them for good and of their political aspirations. So I think that's what we'll see happen there.
That's it. And meanwhile, America have been bombing Islamic State targets because they don't want Islamic State to rise up in the ruins of the country. One other one is Iran. We've had an American general on saying this is a huge strategic opportunity. Iran has never been weaker in the last decade or so. This is a chance for a credible threat coming from America to make Iran back away from nuclear power. But presumably, there could even be more rumblings from its own population. Iran feels like the big loser in all of this.
It does feel like the big loser, but again, let's be careful. What do losers do when they're, or people who think they're losing? What do they do when they're cornered? Why wouldn't they build a bomb if that's their only way out? I mean, that has been a fear of mine for some time, as Iran has looked weaker and weaker within the region. So, for example, as Hezbollah was getting hit so hard by Israel, that really Hezbollah was Iran's sub-nuclear option for a long time. That's probably gone now because not only has Israel hit Hezbollah so hard, this implosion of Syria, this is the right at the center of the so-called Shia crescent we talk about this zone of influence that Iran had carved out across the Middle East, where it had tie-ups with either Shia-led governments or proxies within that region. Syria was the place where Iran used to hand over highly, highly technical weaponry, ballistic missiles, that kind of thing. That's where the handovers happened to Hezbollah. That's how they got their stuff. And so Israel used to hit Hezbollah in those areas. And I believe that Hezbollah is actually, Israel has hit Hezbollah within the last 48 hours just to make sure they know that, this isn't going to stop just because things are changing on the ground. But yeah, that the Israelis have always had room to maneuver to do that within Israel within Syria, because of a kind of tacit agreement they have with the Russians, that the Russians would let them do that, even though Russia was a sponsor of the Assad regime. So look, I mean, the Syrian battlefield has always been one of the most complex in one of the most complex regions of the world, and I don't see that ending just because Assad's gone.
That's such an interesting point to leave it on. Catherine, great to speak to you as ever. That's Catherine Philp, the Times World Affairs editor. Let's talk to Simon Collis, the last British ambassador to Syria. He left in 2012 when the UK embassy was closed. He then moved to become ambassador to Iraq and then to Saudi Arabia, and he lives in the capital there, Riyadh, now. Morning to you, Simon.
Good morning, Steve.
We had Pat McFadden on for the government, and he talked about the potential of the government considering de-prescribing HTS in a bid, presumably at some stage, to recognising them. How far away from that are we? What's your assessment of who is actually running or going to run Syria now, and what the British government should do about it?
Yeah, well, as we just heard from Catherine's excellent commentary, it's a really complex and dynamic situation right now. I think the difference with the comparisons that were made with Afghanistan and with the Taliban is that in Syria, the opposition is diverse. It's not a single opposition. It's a number of diverse groups. HTS is only one of those groups, although it seems a leading one. And the diversity of the groups reflects the diversity of the country. You have Sunni Arab majority, but you've also got a Kurdish minority. You have Shia, you have Ismailis, you have the Alawites, you have the Christians. So it's a very diverse country. And in his recent comments, the leader of the HTS seems to have been going out of his way to recognize that diversity and to signal that the new Syria will take that into account. He's talked about the possibility of dissolving the organization. They've clearly been on a journey from an extremist past linked with Al-Qaeda and with Daesh. But he's been putting out messages to reassure the Kurds, to reassure the Christians, to reassure the Alawites.
And should we believe him?
Should CNN a couple of days ago for the world.
Should people believe him? That's the question, I suppose.
Yeah, it's the key question, isn't it? It's absolutely the key question. Is this tactical or is it real? Now, they're on the ground. They're in Damascus. I think whilst we can't be sure about how it will turn out, the right response, as Mr. McFadden seems to have already indicated, has to be to explore their readiness to walk their talk.
Really?
And to make clear readiness to support them if they do that, because it's in the Syrian interest and the wider regional and international interest, the British interest, that this transition happens as smoothly as it can, and that there is stability and a chance for the 5 million Syrian refugees and as many again internally displaced to return to their homes and rebuild their country.
Give them a chance is the message. That's really interesting. Simon, good to speak to you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. That's Simon Collis there, the last British ambassador to Syria. He left in 2012. Saying what we've heard a couple of people say, Asma, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, that's HTS, they've been on a journey, and there's some grounds for optimism that they might be willing to oversee a pluralist Syria.